Hey, what's up, YouTube fans? So, what I wanted to talk about in this video, right, um, is this article made by a creationist organization. They made this article. You could find this if you look it up. It's called Homo erectus, the ape man that wasn't. Right? And so they were trying to debunk Homo erectus. Um, what's funny is when I had first seen that, I thought that they were gonna be trying to say that like Homo erectus, that like the fossils were like faked, that it like wasn't a real creature, that it was like faked, like fake put together, right? Like that it's like Piltdown Man or whatever. But if you read what they say, they don't deny that the fossils are real. And they don't even seem to be thinking that most, if any, of the Homo erectus are like a mixture of human and ape bones. They don't think that there's any fraud like that, but they just think that their whole argument is basically just like, oh, there's not good reason to think that they're a different species from us. It's just like people making a big deal over nothing. It's just all differences that exist within the normal human variation. Which so it's very telling that that's the argument that most creationist organizations are now making, right? That would seem to indicate that they find the fossils to be convincing that it isn't just like a fake fossil, right? So the fact that they're not relying on that as their argument, that's telling, right? And it's funny that they're like the name of the article is the Homo erectus, the ape man that wasn't, and yet they acknowledge that they are real, right? They acknowledge like that those fossils are of real creatures, right? But they just their whole point is just like, oh, well, but they're just human. And so their way that they try and like prove that is they try and say like, oh, these variations like sloped forehead and big brow ridge are found in some humans alive today. And they showed a picture of this Russian boxer that has a big brow ridge to try and prove that, right? And a few things. So one thing, that Russian boxer, he doesn't have all of the traits of Homo erectus simultaneously, like having no chin. The chin is something we only find in Homo sapiens. He has a big brow ridge, but he still has a chin. He has most of the features we would expect of Homo sapiens, right? So, and and it's not like they try and act like that. It's just like that people are just like forcing it to look like that it's like an ape, like that they're just like all over and a bias that they're just like trying to like fudge it, of like saying like that they're just like making a big deal over nothing, right? But it really does, like, if you just look at the skull, you'll immediately see it doesn't look like a regular human skull. It looks very much more like a chimpanzee, significantly enough that this is so. As someone who myself is very much interested in things like Homo erectus, I actually know this website called Spreadshirt where you can make your own shirt, right? And I've made a shirt, right, where it shows a picture of this skull of Homo erectus fossil that was found, and it says Homo erectus, right? And most people, when they, or like many people, right, when they see it, right, like what people will oftentimes say when they see the pictures, they'll say like, "Oh, is that a monkey?" Like that's commonly what people see. Like when people see the skull, the first thought that comes to mind. Or like also this lady at work, right? I had like shown her like this picture of a Homo erectus skull, right? And she was like, "Oh, what is that? Is that like a gorilla or something?" So I mean, it's not like that people are just like trying to like just because they have like a bias toward, and like, but that lady herself, she had like seemed kind of like that she was maybe like a creationist, or she was like sort of a little bit confused and seemed sort of like suspicious when I was saying about evolution, right? But when I had shown her that picture of the Homo erectus skull, she was like, "Oh, what is that? Is that like a gorilla or a chimpanzee or something?" That was her first thought. Her first thought was not like, "Oh, is that a human skull?" Right? So even though these creationist groups, they're trying to make it like that, oh, just because of like evolutionary bias, that we're just like trying to like force it to look like that, we're just trying to like force the impression that that's what it looks like. But that actually is what it looks like. Even, you know, it's not, it doesn't take any bias. That's what it looks like. It looks a lot more like a chimp or a gorilla than most modern human skulls do. And it's not just one single characteristic like large brow ridge, it's many things simultaneously, right? Like small brain case size, large brow ridge, no chin, facial prognathism, several features all at once, right? And this is what else is important to know also, is that radiometric dating indicates that Homo erectus showed up before modern humans, right? So based on what radiometric dating indicates, Homo erectus showed up over 1 million years ago, whereas we've never once found a Homo sapien fossil that dates back that far, right? Never once. We have found many Homo sapien fossils, but never have we found one that's radiometric dating would indicate goes back 1 million years. Some people will like say like, "Oh, well, I have whatever problem with like that. I think that radiometric dating isn't reliable. The numbers they're getting of millions of years." Regardless, radiometric dating doesn't assume evolution, right? It's based on physical observations, and it perfectly fits the chronological order that evolutionary theory predicts. When I was telling that to someone on the internet recently, they were saying like, "Oh, well, that's just because they change the evolutionary narrative every time it's wrong." And I was like, "Can you name examples? Because I'm sure that in some, like, humans aren't omniscient, so, you know, there's going to be some instances where we would have guessed that it would be one thing, but then the radiometric dating indicates something else." But by and large, for like large groups like mammals, tetrapods, vertebrates, we like consistently, without exception, like a certain amount of time in the past, you get tetrapods are all already around, but no mammals yet, and there aren't any exceptions to that, right? Like it's completely without exception. And same with, there's a certain amount of time that you have fish already, but no tetrapods yet. There's no exceptions to that, right? Like not one single exception, right? So I mean, like, you could maybe find like, oh, maybe our predictions will be off with like small groups here and there, like, but you're never gonna find like something that like contradicts, like for like a big group like mammals. There's no exceptions, right? And so in any event, Homo erectus, right, it shows up in the fossil record before we ever get Homo sapiens, right? And so whereas with Homo sapiens, to have like a giant brow ridge that's like really, really protruding like Homo erectus will be like a rare condition, right? The fossil record indicates that for Homo erectus, it was the norm, right? And it wasn't just that, it was also having no chin, facial prognathism, smaller brain, all of these things at once, right? And a stronger build, all of these things at once, right? Also, not to mention that Homo habilis, right? Most creationists, not all of them, but most of them will think that Homo habilis is just an ape. They'll say, quote, it's just an ape. But Homo habilis is a lot more human-like than any non-human ape skull alive today, right? Like with the teeth, the brain case size, the relatively small brow ridge, and so I mean, in the fossil and Homo habilis, right, shows up before Homo erectus in the fossil record, right? And so I mean, and then part of their argument for why they try and say that people are making a big deal out of nothing with Homo erectus and it's just human, part of their whole argument is like, oh, well, there's strong evidence that Homo erectus was very intelligent because of, tools being found by them. But it's like, okay, so you realize that in order for it to be intermediate doesn't require that it be stupid, right? Its physical characteristics can still be intermediate between the physical characteristics of a chimp and a modern human. It doesn't have to be stupid, right? And not to mention that we really can't know for sure whether or not they were equally intelligent as us, because like, sure, they made like stone tools, but did they make spaceships? Did they make iPhones? No, they never did. So, it's possible that maybe if they still were around, they maybe would be able to. So it's a possibility that they were just as intelligent as us. And I mean, I legitimately think that is likely the case. They maybe were just as intelligent as us or almost as intelligent as us, but that's irrelevant to whether or not they were intermediate. They don't have to be dumb to be intermediate. Their intelligence isn't really something we can determine definitively, like their intelligence level. We can't determine definitively from fossils. We can determine like, oh, did they have physical features intermediate between human and chimp? And so, I mean, with the point of Homo habilis, much more human-like than most apes, than like non-human ape skulls alive today. Homo erectus, more ape-like than most human skulls alive today, right? So we have ape-like humans and human-like apes in the fossil record, right? We have both of that, ape-like humans and human-like apes. And so, I mean, it really leaves very little room, not really any, for like anything that you can say is like different between a human skull and an ape skull, right? If Homo erectus is just human, there's really not much you can say is different. And like if Homo habilis is just an ape, there's really very little you can say then that's different between a human skull and an ape skull, right? If you look at the skulls of a baby human, baby chimp, baby gorilla, and baby orangutan, they look almost identical, right? Like I showed my mom pictures of a baby human skull, baby chimp skull, baby gorilla, and baby orangutan, and my mom couldn't even tell which one was the human skull. That won't be the case for the vast majority of creatures, but you know, chimps, gorillas, orangutans, they have forward-facing eyes enclosed by bone like us. They have the same dental formula as us. Already, they have very similar skulls to us. And then especially when you take Homo habilis into the mix, and then if you also say that Homo erectus is human, right? You barely have any difference between the skull of a human and the skull of an ape then, right? All right, that's all for now. See you guys.